Hi, welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and thanks for watching. Well, a big looming state deficit, leadership elections, and more when Pennsylvania Newsmakers returns.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, the state, it looks like somewhere in the neighborhood, believe it or not, of a $2 to $3 billion deficit coming up as we end this fiscal year. No, not this December, but June already. We're talking about a big deficit. We had leadership elections in the Pennsylvania legislature. Some new leaders, some old leaders back, joining me to ferret all this out, to figure it all out. On my right, your left, Amy Worden with the Philadelphia Inquirer. Right across from me, Jen Rehill from Public Radio Capital News. Do I got that right,
You got it right.
And, of course, Robert Swift, Times-Shamrock Newspapers. Welcome, journalists all. Say hi.
Hi, Terry.
Hi, thank you.
All right, Amy, let's start with you. Look, Governor Rendell this past week had a press conference. He's already warning the state, warning all of us about this looming deficit. What did the governor have to say?
Well, the governor said, quite frankly, that while he would try everything, I think the expression he used was every arrow in his quiver before moving to tax increases, he did not rule out the prospect of a statewide tax increase. Yeah.
Now, was he his usual self? I mean, you know, he's always optimistic. He never seems to like to get down and say, you know, we can't beat this problem. What was his kind of attitude like?
Well, you know, was he
snarky or no?
No, I think he slipped in the bad news in the middle of sort of discussing other options, okay, and trying to be sort of optimistic about we're coming into the in the fourth quarter, we have Christmas sales, and maybe there'll be maybe there'll be a hint of good news heading into it, but things look pretty bleak.
Jen, he also, if I remember right, or if I recall rightly, said you all don't whine over things. I mean, he was so. Is this sort of a typical? I mean, you've covered Rendell for many years. What's your impression of this?
You know, he's kind of, I think, a really no-nonsense guy, and he wants to give the good news, but if there's bad news, I think he's just, like, telling it like it is, and like, okay, if there's going to have to be cuts, there's going to have to be cuts. There's nothing I can do.
Yeah, now he's already worked on some of them, right? I mean, there's already been...
There's something around, like, 4.5% across the agencies is what they've sort of planned to do. It's interesting, I was at a hearing, a budget hearing in the State House with the new Budget Secretary, Mary Soderberg, and she said something that really caught my attention, which was they've sent a letter to the cabinet secretaries not only saying you need to find some more places to cut, but maybe programs to eliminate. Mm-hmm. And I don't think we've heard that kind of talk before.
And Rendell echoed that later.
Go ahead.
Rendell echoed that later.
But you think, but I'll go to Robert. He's a historian here. I want to talk to him about that. But this is not no nonsense now. I mean, it doesn't look like the economy is getting any better, even on Washington. I mean, this is, I mean, all our viewers out there, this is a very serious problem, and it's hard to believe there won't be some kind of program cuts.
Oh, no, there will be, yeah. I mean, you know, the question is how much and how deeply. The governor's maintained, he will not cut from the budgets of the programs of the most vulnerable. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that others aren't going to take hits.
We didn't hear any talk about pay cuts for cabinet officers and Now, you know, Michael Nutter, the mayor in Philadelphia, your town, your news.
Well, legislative pay is going to go up 2 or 3%.
It's inflation-based,
right? COLA next month, so that's not being cut. It was an odd remark, I thought, when Rendell talked about he didn't want to hear any whining, because he's going to hear whining. He's going to start next Monday when the county officials are in town, and they're going to whine about a mandate for salaries of district attorneys. So I don't know what he expects. There's going to be a lot of whining. Now, some of the programs that have been cut so far, one I thought was, he chopped this one program, Opportunity Grants. It was an economic development thing in half back in October. And that program had come under criticism and an audit from State Auditor General. So you've seen some deep cuts already.
Yeah, but before we get to the tough word, the big T word. I mean, nobody likes to use that T word, but as I think all of you know, you all been around this town for a long time. Recessions, bad economic times. Rendell came in and raised taxes. right? Or he had the legislature raise the income tax. All these past recessions have had tax hikes. Casey, Thornburg. What about, Jen, go ahead. What about the T word?
You know, I think that the governor very much believes in the philosophy that you should continue to invest during a recession as a way to get out of recession and grow jobs. So I think that he would prefer to raise taxes a little to continue creating jobs on, you know, infrastructure projects. That's what he's really talked about a lot, even as a national strategy to get out of the recession.
The Dwight Evans, the Appropriations Chairman of the House, has said you cannot cut your way out of this deficit alone.
Yeah.
I mean, you just can't cut $2-3 billion alone. So no one's ruling out, except the Senate Republican leader, ruling out tax hikes. But that's going to be the crunch, and how long it takes to August or what?
Yeah, well, Republicans aren't giving him any wiggle room here. I mean, all they're saying basically is cut more out of the government, state government budget. They're saying, you know, we don't want to dip into the rainy day fund. It's pretty healthy right now.
But isn't that what the I mean, in theory, that's what the rainy day fund is for, correct?
Oh, yes, rainy day. I think
rainy day.
Rain is upon us.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll continue this, but with big leadership, some changes, some old, some new. We'll take that up following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, the statewide voice of business. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Pennsylvania Medical Society. Doctors and patients, preserve the relationship. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're talking about the looming state budget. Everybody admits there's a deficit coming along. How big remains to be seen. Governor Rendell held a press conference last week, or had a press conference. What was it, Amy? Was it a press conference, and then was he doing other things? And of course, you journalists got into this subject with him. How did that work? Does ananybody know?
Yeah, well, he was announcing the executive order that he just signed to extend the life of the Pennsylvania Healthcare Cost Containment Council. So, but then he always lets us, ask questions on other subjects.
And of course, you got right into
the budget. Of course.
Okay,
of course.
Robert, let me ask you this question before we go on. You're a longtime Capitol observer. Does anyone, this business with the Senate Republicans that Amy brought up, a great point. They always say they're not going to do the T's, the taxes, and then in the past they always end up supplying some votes for the taxes. Do they really mean this? I mean, what's your sense in talking to the leaders?
One of the things what Senator Scarnati said, you have to realize the Senate has 8 new members coming in. And that's on the scale proportionally of the 50 new House members who came in 2007 with a 50-chamber Senate. So the new members coming in tend to be more conservative. So I think off the bat for a Republican leader to utter the T word is going to be problems. Now, at some point with these budget things, this happened in 1991, you face a chasm. And I remember the House Republican leader, late Matt Ryan, getting up there one morning in August on a weekend morning at 6 o'clock in the morning saying, we have to do something. Yeah. And there's a point at which they all reach where you have to try something.
So I mean, at some point, they may let the new members off of the vote. Let's be honest about how that happens. They let some new members, well, we're not going to let the more seasoned, experienced members who come from safe districts, we'll
go
give
vote.
You
a pass.
Yeah, you go vote. Go ahead, Jen.
I think that that Robert's right, because I think you're right about that. That the report that we heard from Global Insight this week, which provides the sort of financial news for the state, was really grim. Recession stretching into at least maybe the end of 2009. The economy may be starting to really bounce back in 2011.
Wow.
And that by mid-2009, so 2 more quarters from now, unemployment's going to be at 7% in Pennsylvania. Job losses, they estimated at 66,000.
Yeah.
So, that's a huge loss of revenue for the state in a number of ways. The state gets its money from sales tax and income tax. If you have 66,000 people lose their jobs, unemployment at 7%, there's just not the money coming into the coffers.
People stop buying, so the sales tax revenues fall off, and the income tax.
Gas tax. No doubt.
Oh, yeah, there's the other point. Now, we're all happy, right, because gasoline is below $2 a gallon,
Right.
but, yeah. All right, let's turn our, anything else on this? I mean, you all, go ahead, we have plenty of time.
Just on the, one of the things that it got to extend in 1991 where Governor Casey was going to close some state hospitals.
Yeah.
Now, that was ended up being a bargaining chip to get tax votes,
Right.
that they kept the hospitals open, but you would start to get into that sort of thing. You get a frantic search for new revenues. Already, Representative Babette Joseph has talked about why are we not taxing, chewing tobacco, bringing up that argument. Rendell talks as if the revenues from the natural gas drilling in the Marcellus Shale are going to be the savior on this thing.
Yeah. All right, Amy, let's talk a little bit about these. The leadership positions in the legislature, first of all, very important. Leaders dominate the Pennsylvania legislature. It's not a bottom-up. It's you've been covering these. You can talk to a handful of people and figure out what's going on, right?
Right. Yeah.
So what was the big news in terms of the leadership elections? Talking about the leadership in the General Assembly, they'll have to work with Governor Rendell.
Yeah, well, there are a number of big news items, I would say. For the last 2 years, because of an unusual situation, a very tight split in the House between the Democrats and the Republicans, we had a Republican speaker in a democratically controlled chamber. That's Dennis O'Brien from Philadelphia. The Democrats now hold a nice, more comfortable 5-seat margin, and they want a Democratic speaker, which is what they did last week. They elected Keith McCall unanimously, by the way, who had been
which is unusual for the Democrats.
Yes,
right?
who had been the whip, and then the more contentious race was for majority leader, who was going to succeed Bill DeWeese, and where was Bill DeWeese, who was around during the BonusGate years, and has saw the loss of his number 2, indicted Mike Vion in that case.
So Jen, the big question was, as Amy just brought up, was the question of Bill DeWeese. He's been under considerable pressure. Some members have said he was leader during the BonusGate of the Democratic caucus. 10, I guess, staff people, 1 sitting House member, 1 former House member, all Democrats indicted. He's not been implicated personally, let's make that clear, but folks calling for his, some legislators were saying you should step down as leader. Was that really the big issue in the House, was the role that DeWeese would play? What's your judgment on that?
I think, that was the race that I was watching very closely, and that I think there was the most speculation about. You were right, he hasn't been charged in the so-called BonusGate investigation, but his former chief of staff, Mike Manzo, basically implied that he knew about some of the alleged crimes on the stand at a preliminary hearing in the case, which I think really hurt the representatives standing. And, just a few days before the elections, all of a sudden, we thought maybe he was going to run again for majority leader, and maybe he was going to win. He's very good at caucus politics, and he's an institution among the Democrats. He's been in the legislature for 33 years. He has been the leader of the Democratic caucus in the House since the early 90s. So this is sort of like, it would be a sea change if essentially his protege hadn't stepped in to majority leader instead, and Todd Eaches, who he helped get elected, basically.
So in other words, they moved up, everybody in the Democratic House, they sort of moved up. There's no real shake-up in that sense in the leadership. So none of the folks who were saying, leave, they worked out a kind of deal, Robert, where DeWeese remains number 3 guy. Is that about right? Number 3 guy in the caucus. The other leaders move up a bit. Dwight Evans, the powerful chairman of the Democratic Appropriations Committee, who many argue is the real policy wonk and sort of inside leader in the caucus, was part of all this arrangement. Is that about right?
Yeah, there's not, a real lot of change in this leadership from what's been. And I'd like to say a note on the Speaker Dennis O'Brien, who was left without a chair to sit in. Governor Casey once again had this line, "What did you do when you had the power?" And I think Dennis O'Brien, you say he got an insurance law to expand coverage for autism. That's his legacy.
That's
now,
his legacy.
he did not turn the speakership into a nonpartisan office.
Right.
That was not something that was able to be accomplished.
All right, we're going to go to break, but I thought all along that as soon as either party got functional control of the legislature, that he was a temporary, just put it, you're all shaking your heads, you agree with that?
Yeah,
he was there
absolutely.
All right, we'll be back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the State System of Higher Education. 14 state-owned universities. The state system is the largest provider of higher education in Pennsylvania. And by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. We're talking about a lot of inside stuff in Harrisburg, but this is important. Who leads the legislature actually does matter, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
A little bit like budgets and programs.
Yeah.
All right, we focused a little bit on the Democrats. We really got an inside baseball here. Well, what about the Republicans? They had no problem there, right?
No, it was completely quiet all over in about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
No, actually that their race dragged on all afternoon as well. The House Minority Leader Sam Smith from Jefferson County was positioned to retain his job. Of course, they're the minority, so in general, it's not all that important in a sort of a global way.
Right.
But word broke, a week or so before the elections that John Purcell, the former majority leader, former speaker from Philadelphia, was going to orchestrate a coup. He has been virtually invisible for the last 2 years in the Capitol. I mean, not holding press conferences, not out in front at all. So that was really interesting. A little action in the Republican caucus, and indeed that's what he tried to do, but he couldn't drum up the votes.
I think that's really significant because John Purcell was a major power broker, as we all know, for a very long time, and sort of ruled the House when they were in the majority, and took over the Pennsylvania with an iron fist, and took over the Philadelphia Parking Authority, among all kinds of other items. Was involved with the pay raise.
And we made all those deals. I mean,
he was a consummate deal maker. To see him silent is very strange. And I think that Sam Smith unseated him. That's correct. And so to see him come back, like from, sort of from behind the scenes, and there was all of this scuttlebutt about a consultant that was hired to maybe dig up dirt on Sam Smith and a bunch of other Republican leaders.
This sounded like politics of old going on there.
Politics of old, but what's happening in the House is that the caucus leadership is following the election returns. The Republican caucus is shifting to the west, where they are winning seats, and the Democratic leadership is shifting to the east, where they are picking up seats. And this comes, this trend started 10 years ago, and it's now showing up in these elections.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was bad in the last segment. We all went on too long, so we're going to take a quick break, and we'll come back following these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Highmark Blue Shield, changing the way health plans work for business with a variety of plan options for employers and more choices for employees. Information is available at highmark.com. Have a greater hand in your company's health. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, the future of long-term care. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by Penn Future, where we believe that every environmental victory grows the economy, and by the Pennsylvania Cyber Charter School, bringing educational innovation and freedom to the children of Pennsylvania.
Hi, welcome back to the program. Well, we're getting deeply into the machinations of the Pennsylvania, Amy's laughing, of the Pennsylvania legislature. Well, it's important. These are the people who are going to make the big decisions that are going to have a lot to say about the lives of all of us. All right, Amy, BonusGate, it's a story that won't go away. Robert was saying on break, 3 years, Robert?
Entering the third year of the investigation in January.
How does this all play into this business in the legislature? What's going on?
Well, we were just discussing that well, we know it played a big role in the House Democratic elections.
Right.
The question is now, what role did it play in the House Republican elections? Shortly before the elections took place, my colleagues at my newspaper uncovered information that showed that John Purcell, as majority leader, had signed a $9 million contract with a data gathering firm to get information about voters. Now, he would say his constituents. So the question is, was it for campaign purposes or not? We don't know. But what it says is that the Attorney General, a Republican, is now looking at the Republicans in the legislature. Of course, it came after the November 4th elections,
Sure.
but nonetheless, there is an investigation.
Yeah, well, look, the Attorney General came under a lot of heat from Democrats for only apparently going after Democrats. He says, well, when I get to it, these investigations take time. Jen, but the fact of the matter is, in the general election, the voters didn't seem to mind. He won by 6 percentage points, the only Republican statewide office holder. Does BonusGate continue? I mean, he has said there will be indictments. He has said flat out. I mean, is that something that everybody is sort of expecting that any moment or by the end of the
next year? The last time I heard him speak about it, he said, "Well, the next round of charges would probably come next year."
What's he doing? Giving everybody a holiday recess?
He says that they're still doing the investigation. That it would be an injustice to the investigators to move too soon on that. So, I think the jury's out on whether or not it's going to be considered a partisan thing or not. I think if there's a string of Republican folks associated with the Republican caucus, just like there were in the Democratic caucus that were indicted, he's cleared of all of that kind of talk and maybe primed for a run for governor.
Right, and don't forget the Senate.
Oh, and
There's questions about the Senate, certainly the Senate Republicans.
He's not done the Senate. Robert, we have about a minute left. Where do you think this goes?
This public corruption investigation by a state prosecutor is almost unprecedented.
That's right.
It's an entire legislative branch. In the past, these were done by federal prosecutors, and they were more tight-lipped about the investigations. There's been a lot of leaking on this one. But and it's still, like I said, the length and the scope of the thing is what's very unusual.
Yeah. But I think everybody expects, we're going to get out of here in about 25 seconds, but everybody expects, and you all agree, that there'll be additional indictments. I mean, and would you be shocked if there weren't? I mean, you would think there are going to be Republicans will be named. Anybody doubt that?
We're waiting.
That's what the man said. There's going to be more indictments.
Yeah.
I mean,
he didn't say Republicans,
no.
but the expectation is given where the investigation is going, right?
Yeah.
All right, thanks. All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, you stay healthy.